"Show me," says Thomas, who we refer to as Doubting Thomas because of this story, even though nobody refers to St. Peter as denying Peter, which seems a bit unfair. There is a good argument for locating St. Thomas at the end of his life on the Indian subcontinent as one of the great missionary evangelists of the early church. But he earns this name because the story zeroes in on him at a particular low moment in his life when he says, "Show me." In fact, he says, "Show me in such a way that your story of a living Jesus is compatible with a man having wounds in his hands and in his feet, and a gaping wound in his side, which is incompatible with life. Show me a dead man walking. Show me a crucified man upright by his own power." It's a tall order, but it's not as if there are not other instances of physicality in the resurrection appearances of Christ in the midst of his disciples. Not only in this story where Thomas touches him and puts his hand in the wounds in his hands and in his feet and the wound in his side, but also where Jesus gathers with his disciples on a beach in the Gospel of St. Luke, sits with them, eats a piece of broiled fish with them. There on the road to Emmaus with the two Emmaus disciples, he manipulates bread and wine. But might the story not be easier to grasp, no pun intended, if there were not all this physicality, if Christ did not present himself as he does with both wounds and an appetite? It's less of a leap, perhaps, to imagine a ghostly me, which is nonetheless the real me, which can detach itself from this body and its physicality and go somewhere better or somewhere worse, or groan diaphanously in a hallway, or perhaps be the better me, the real me, the boiled down, beautiful me that life in this body has never allowed me to be. Ghost stories are rare in Israel's tradition, but they're not unknown. There's that famous story of Saul and the witch of Endor attempting to conjure up the ghost of Samuel from its resting place in the nether regions. But this is no ghost story. Casper is nowhere in the house. The evangelists are at pains to present Jesus physically present with his disciples, eating a meal with them, being touched by them, conversing with them recognizably as himself. And yet there is a twist. In the Thomas story, Jesus appears in a room where the doors have been all locked. In the story of the road to Emmaus, Jesus is suddenly taken from their sight. He is himself, but there is a difference. And so in the evangelist's portrayal, there is this element of ambiguity, but we can perhaps come up with a better word for it. There is an element of mystery, as Jesus is presented as having both all of the attributes that they had known him by, and yet with a different relationship with his physical surroundings. And it is not for nothing that in the Luke story of the meal that Jesus shared with his disciples on the beach, it says that in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering. What is the importance of bodily life in the economy of eternity? We know no other life but one expressed as physical beings in the exchange of sights and sounds and colors and smells, things sensed with these hands of ours, with these feet of ours, things sensed in the taste buds and in our olfactory organs. Are we finished with the gorgeous combination of garlic and oil and rosemary with these lamb chops? We ask ourselves the questions that small children ask in their innocence. Will there be the smell of a much beloved but smelly dog in the economy of eternity? The earliest discussion of what resurrection life will be, both for us and in Christ's resurrection as the first fruits of our own, is his discussion of the seed and the plant. He begins by posing the question that some ask: how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? Paul's response suggests that what we sow into the ground, what undergoes death, is both like and unlike what God will remake for an eternal purpose. What is sown in death is a seed, more precisely a naked seed, of what will ultimately become the full glory of the plant. Look at your own hands. Think about what your body did today. Breathe in the smells of your garden or of your kitchen. This is important. This is not something that will be merely discarded. It will be touched, transformed, and changed. If Christ has become a ghost and has abandoned physical life, then where we live, what we eat, how we relate to each other ethically no longer matters. Thomas is asking to be shown not only that the woman's story of the resurrection is true, he is asking to be shown that any of this matters to us who are still embodied, still living in relationship to others, still eating and walking and living and loving. Show me that he's still the one we knew, that he's still with us in this embodied life that we lead. Show me that this has anything to do with real life. The resurrection of Christ signals hope, not only for you beyond the day of your death, but hope for what will happen to you this week and this year. It is that promise of God's power to raise, to transform, to beautify and to dignify human being, body, soul, and spirit, which sends the disciples around the world, which sends Thomas ultimately to India. It is the promise of that same power which can transform and dignify the decades remaining to you in this life. Ask him. He'll show you.